Okay, good morning. We'll go ahead
You look all bright and
and
cheery today.
get this going. And according to the agenda that we've got, now that we've got Terry in here, we usually, besides saying thank you everyone for being here. I know it's kind of drippy today. It's kind of cold out there. And now that we're done with Veterans Day, I know personally that there are a number of people that after the big parade in Albany, people sort of disappeared to go traveling or to be with family for Thanksgiving that's coming up. It certainly couldn't be that they're already gone down to Eugene for the Ducks game on Saturday. So with that, we always start out by, if you would please stand, and according to the service you're in, either uncover or not cover, and help recite with me the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and we then follow that. Terry picks it out in her key to sing the national anthem.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail as the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets triplet, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated.
I don't know, I had that,
That is my fault.
what do they call that? I get complimented for it a lot, and I don't even know what it is. It's just there.
Okay, so next on the agenda is Terry gets to talk about new activities that we've got going on, reports from the team leaders, and then we will be going into introductions and then getting into our program. So we're really excited about our program. So, Terry?
Yay! Okay, this is my turn.
Yep.
It's my time. It's my time. Dun, 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 dun.
Updates from Terry.
Okay, so we do have our newsletter still here available. It's a 6-page newspaper. If you haven't seen it, it's we'll put it out once a year. We are having our Christmas holiday event coming up, and we have a wonderful speaker. Jonah Doolittle Hops is our speaker. We're bringing her in from California. So she will be here to sign and sell books, as well as tell the story of her grandfather, who she grew up with. And she has really good insight on the kind of person he was, the character he had. You know, a lot of times, and that's what kind of drives me, is your World War II veterans. They have these amazing stories about character and determination. When you are a flying ace, or when you are somebody with that kind of a background, there is some characteristics about you that set you apart. And so she's going to tell about those kinds of things too. So I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say about her grandparents, who she believes too that her wife, the wife, was a strong influence to the man, Jimmy Doolittle. And so that's really cool, because I've always had a strong belief that behind every strong man is a strong woman, right? So that is the, yeah, John's laughing. There is a great, that's going to be our Christmas party, and it will be starting in this hangar and moving to another hangar where we'll have a party. So the tickets are $40, and you're all welcome to join us. What else? We are really doing a lot of different things. I don't know how many of you might have gotten my email yesterday. I sent out an email, and I'll be following it up in a couple days again, that we've located all 12 propellers for the aircraft. And so we are going to do that as part of what we're raising money for at the Christmas party. So we started to tell people about that. 12 propellers, $3,000 a piece. That is, really a great deal. We are really excited about it. And the propeller that's sitting over here, anyone who purchases an entire blade, so $3,000, will get their name on that. So I have something for you all. Where'd it go? Bye, I'm coming back here real soon. I also have some free shirts today. So there's a box of shirts back here. Last week, I really thought Terry Schrick was going to be here today because our chaplain, Mr. Myers, is very ill. And so we wanted to say thoughts and prayers for him. He really misses being here with you. He's been gone for a couple months, and the reason he's gone is because he's fighting cancer or something terrible like that. So last week, I came out of retirement with my singing group, and we sang for Terry Schrick's Veterans Breakfast, and that was a lot of fun. And one of the things that were happening there was they had these Van Houser shirts for free for veterans. So I collected as many as I could put in a box, and that is what these are. So if you would like a new fresh shirt, I got size 15 and a half to 17s, and hopefully there was a lot more smaller shirts than there were bigger shirts, but there's a 17 here, and there's beautiful shirts. They seem to run a little small, so get a bigger size if you can. But they're free, they're yours, and I want you to have them. I wanted to bring some special recognition today to a friend of ours who's been in the Veteran Coffee Club for a long time. I would like to bring up Art Nauer. Would you come up, please? Art is a very unassuming guy, and he's been around a long time, coming to the Milwaukee Club first, and then coming here. And he came to me a while back and said, I want to help, I want to give, and what do you need? You need a computer. So Art donated $2,500 for us to purchase a house computer. You can hold this, it's yours.
Great.
Is that awesome? I think we better give him a big hand. I'm talking, so what's happened is I've been shopping really hard because I want this computer to be the computer for this facility. I want it to be able to edit the videos that we are archiving so that we can make our little short educational clips. I want it to be the one that we have for 5 to 10 years that houses all this amazing stuff that we're collecting. So thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Now I'm thinking about a propeller blade.
Oh, now he's thinking about a propeller blade. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, well, I think that is, for right this moment, that's all I can think of.
Don't go too far.
Is anybody having a birthday this month?
Any birthdays this month?
You have a birthday?
No.
Oh. Paul has a birthday? Next month, okay.
No, this month.
We will have coffee club next month on the 21st. Okay.
I wasn't sure before whether we were going to have a December one since it's that close to Christmas, but that'll be good, and it'll be after the Christmas party, but it'll be just before most of us are really settling in. 21st is about when I'll probably go over and get the tree from the tree lot about half a mile from my house. So, one of the things we do at this point is, how many of you are here for the very first time to a Veterans Coffee? Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3. Okay. So, we will be getting back to you when we get into our discussions after the thing. So think a little bit about, we usually ask people that are here for the first time to talk a little bit about who you are, how did you find us, and why are you here? And it's not normal that people wander in here by accident. You're You're here because somehow you heard about either the B-17 or the Veterans Coffee Club. People find us through a number of ways. So with that, as soon as Terry comes back here then, this becomes the time for her to announce our speaker of the day, who we knew that Mike was coming for the last couple of months, but due to a comedy of errors and misunderstandings, Mike is here this month, and so Terry is going to do the announcement of our program.
Oh, I'm going to announce the speaker. Is that what I'm doing?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Okay, well, Mike Pungercar, he wrote a book, Promise Kept. He's come to us because he represents veterans in a lot of different places. And as you know, we always try to bring in speakers who can relate to the veterans and might offer something to you that will be of interest. And he has a huge background. He is part of the Honor Fights program and just a lot of different veterans associations that I won't even try to name. But we're just really thankful to have you here, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Just to continue in way of introduction, again, my name is Mike Pungercar. If there's a little bit of accent, that's because I was born and raised in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I'll be talking about my dad, and that's where he spent his whole life. I got married back in '67, and my wife and I ended up moving to Michigan in '68. And in 1981, the company I worked for said, "You remember we bought a plant in Springfield, Oregon? We'd like you to go out there and look at a 3 to 5 year position and then probably come back to Michigan." Well, I'll tell you, the first 2 months we were out here, if I'd have called my wife and said they want us back in Michigan, she had the house packed up before I got home. But after we'd been out here about 6 months, she said, "Do you think we can stretch this out for the whole 5 years?"
Wow.
And at 3 years, I was offered a job transfer and turned it down. At 10 years, they were really putting pressure on me to make a move. They didn't tell me they were going to sell the plant. But anyways, we stayed on with the new owners, and I ended up working at the Springfield smelting plant, electric furnace operation, until they closed the plant in 2001. I ended up getting a job with the city of Eugene, worked for 5 years as a safety manager for the employees at the city of Eugene, at which time I retired. This leads into the fact that what I want to share today is you never know when one door closes in your life, when the next one's going to open up and what direction it takes you in. Because I am standing before you today to tell you that I had no idea 7 or 8 years ago that I'd be doing this kind of stuff, doing presentations and traveling around various parts of Oregon. And it all is a result of my dad being a World War II veteran. And let me get a slide up here. My dad was born, named Frank Pungercar Jr. He was born in 1923 on January 4th in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and grew up there. He went to grade school at the same grade school I attended, St. Dominic's Catholic Grade School, went to the same church that I was raised in. But his life changed dramatically when he was a sophomore in high school. My grandfather, Grandpa Pungercar, had a stroke. And Dad had to drop out of school to go to work to raise money for the family. He was the oldest son. By this time, aside from my Aunt Marion and my Uncle Roger, my Uncle Ralph had been born as well. So he was the oldest of 3 boys and the second oldest in the family. Dad was like most World War II veterans. As I grew up, he didn't talk about what he did in World War II. But we watched a TV series, 12 O'Clock High, which was based on the history of the 8th Air Force in World War II. And every once in a while, they would clip in actual combat footage from the 8th Air Force. And just like on that B-17, it's a little hard to see from back there, but there's a triangle A on the tail. And every time these black and white pictures and film with triangle A on the B-17s, you go, yeah, that was my group. That was my group, the 91st Bomb Group. And I found out that he was a radio operator and that he had flown 30 missions all over Germany. When I was about 14, he took me up in the attic and he said, "I want to show you some stuff." And he had a cardboard box. He opened it up and he pulled out his dog tags, his wings, his air medal, the oak leaf cluster for each of the additional 5 missions that he had flown. Sharpshooter with a 45, and of course his good conduct medal. He had to show me that. The little black and white pictures that were taken of him at various locations in Scottsfield, Illinois, Yuma, Arizona. I think one was down in Texas where he had basic training. Some in London, some on base at Bassingbourn, England. A lot of papers, and then he started sharing a couple stories, and all of a sudden he just stopped. And he got this kind of glazed look on his face, and he put everything back in the box, never said a word, and just closed it up. It took me years of maturing to finally look back and realize he was dredging up some memories that he really didn't want to recall. So we got to run the clock ahead a few years here. October of 1999, I had called my dad and said, we're coming back for a vacation. How'd you like me to come back early and we'll go on a fishing trip together? It had been, probably 15, 18 years since we had fished together. So he said yes, and I took him up into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And we didn't have a great fishing trip. He did catch that northern pike, which is the last northern pike that he ever caught. But driving his car back down to Sheboygan, unsolicited, he said, you know, Mike, I remember when I enlisted in the Army Air Corps in 1942. And for over an hour, he shared story after story. A couple of them I remembered from when I was 14, but everything else was brand new. I mean, he literally had me laughing. He had me crying. I finally said, Dad, nobody in the family knows this stuff. You've got to cut a tape and share these stories. He did not like talking into a tape recorder. My mother died at 44, and he had remarried. And Gertie, my stepmother, had Alzheimer's. So she was in an Alzheimer's care facility, and my dad was at home alone. But I said, when you come back from visiting Gertie in the evening, pour yourself a cup of coffee, set up the tape recorder, one story at a time. I said, I promise you, if you share these stories, I will transcribe that tape and get them out to everybody in the family, both sides of the family, because they need to know what you did for 3 years of your life. Well, in May of 2000, a box showed up with this tape in it. To Mike from Dad, 11/2/42 to October, I think it's 9th, 1945, my 3 years in the Air Force. Now, one of the things, some of you guys in here served in the 8th Air Force, or in the Air Force during World War II. And my dad always referred to it as the Army Air Corps, even though it had turned to the Air Force, or the Army Air Force, and eventually to the Air Force. So I used the term interchangeably in my book, Army Air Force, Army Air Force. I was working full-time, City of Eugene. I put that tape on a shelf in my office. And it sat there, because I'll always get to it. Well, November 19th, in fact, next Sunday will be the anniversary of my dad passing away back in 2006. Cancer took him. It took me about 6 months to play that tape. And when I transcribed it, I had 12 pages typed up, and my wife came in the office and said, I can see it in your face, there's something going on. I said, I've got 100 questions for him. Why didn't I play this damn tape while he was still with us? Well, when he passed away, we were cleaning out his attic, and we found an old suitcase and opened it up. And inside that suitcase are all these papers from World War II, a bunch of little black and white photos from World War II, and a cookie or a coffee tin. When I opened it up, there's his dog tags, his wings. I mean, for me, it was a treasure trove. My sister said, that goes to you, and I said, good, because otherwise I'm going to fight like hell, because I wanted it. So between what we had on the tape and what Dad had left at home in that suitcase, I began what turned out to be a one-year journey, if you will. I had retired, my wife and I, God bless Nellie, whenever we traveled, got connections I made over the internet with the 91st Bomb Group Memorial Association. One of the guys in Illinois took my dad's serial number, ends up coming back, sends me a spreadsheet, 30 missions. The date of the mission, the serial number of the B-17. He had only talked about one B-17 that they had named Peace or Bust. I found out my dad flew on 13 different B-17s over his 30 missions. Part of that is because he flew his last 15 missions as a lead radio operator. And I remember saying, Dad, everybody in the German Air Force and Luftwaffe, all the gunners knew that only 2 planes carried the bomb sight anymore at that point in the war, the lead and deputy lead. I said, you were flying one or the other, and I said, you were flying a damn target. And he said, well, I was about 21 years old, and they said they'd shorten my missions from 35 to 30. Has 5 less takeoffs, 5 less landings, 5 less time getting shot at. He said, I said, I'll do it. And he was a good radio operator. Let's talk and back up in time a little bit. Of course, 1939, things really went to hell in Europe with Hitler and Mussolini, taking over North Africa and most of Europe. On the other side of the ocean, Japan was in war with China and spreading into Southeast Asia. We put on oil embargoes, steel embargoes, and finally, December 7, 1941, the United States was in World War II. And I'm preaching to the choir for some of you guys because you lived through it. One of the things in doing these talks, whether it's Honor Flight, about my book, I do a talk on the air war over Europe, I've got a presentation about the attack in Pearl Harbor, and a couple other talks I did. The young people, that's the people I'm really trying to get the message to, because they forget. And they get very little in their history books about World War II anymore. They forget the sacrifices that were made, not just by the veterans who served, but by this entire country, that whole generation that supported the war effort. If you ever get a chance, and some of you have been back to the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C. on your honor plates, I see it on your hats. The World War II Memorial isn't just dedicated to the veterans who served, it's dedicated to that whole generation. There's big bronze reliefs and stuff of women working, Rosie the Riveters in factories on planes, farmers out in the fields. The wheat wreaths around all of the columns around the World War II Memorial, and the oak wreaths that alternate. The wheat wreaths represent the agricultural strength of this country. The oak leaves, the industrial strength of this country. That really helped overwhelm both the Japanese, all the Axis powers. When my dad enlisted in 1942, actually he wanted to enlist in January of 42 already, and my grandma said, no, you're the breadwinner right now. You're working in a machine shop. We need that money to help support the family. You gotta keep working. If you get drafted, you get drafted, but until then, you keep working. Well, he finally approached grandma and said, look at this, if I enlist in the Army Air Corps, I can get into a maintenance area and I can make this much money and send this much home, and I make more money there than I will in the machine shop here. So my grandma allowed my dad not for patriotic reasons to enlist, but for financial reasons. But my dad ended up enlisting, and that's him on the far right. I found an old priest's picture in that suitcase, and I have no idea where it was taken, but I don't see any stripes on that sleeve, so I'm pretty sure it was shortly after he enlisted in the Air Force. He actually went to Texas for basic training, and they assigned him as a mechanic working on planes, and he did not enjoy it at all. And he saw a posting on the board that the Air Force was looking for radio operators. Keep in mind, this is a man that dropped out of high school his sophomore year. My dad signed up. I don't know what else he had to do, but they shipped him up to Scottsfield, Illinois. And doing my research, and there's a copy of it in the book, I found the syllabus, a 16-week course that radio operators went through. I may have the mornings and afternoons mixed up, but in one, they did radio repair work, learning how to repair the radios and take care of them, and the other one, Morse code and everything else. And my dad said he got up to 23 words a minute in Morse code, and that's him in the graduation picture from the Scottsfield yearbook. I found that in the attic, and that's his picture. And then when he graduated, and he got his radio operator's patch for the 8th Air Force. He did tell me it was a lot different at 25,000 feet and 50 below zero with all your gear on and your gloves. You don't do 23 words a minute in Morse code under those conditions. He went to gunnery school in Yuma, Arizona. In the middle picture, my dad's in the middle with the hat sticking straight up in the air. And a couple of things I remember talking about that was when they started on the shotguns. He said his shoulder was so sore by the 3rd day he could barely lift the gun anymore, just shooting and shooting and shooting. But again, everybody on the crew except the pilot and co-pilot had to be trained gunners. This is a picture of my mother and my dad. I think they might have gotten engaged because on the back of this picture, either he or my mother had written the big day. Big day. And I know it's not their wedding day, so I think it's when they got engaged, and this was just before he was shipped overseas. The picture on the right, you can see my dad in the back row under the yellow area, and that's where you can see where I got my height from. In fact, he said the only thing that kept him out of the ball turret or the tail was the fact that he was a good radio operator. That plane is one of the practice planes that they flew someplace out of Louisiana. They flew over the Gulf and stuff, started to learn formation flying and whatnot, navigation issues. And the big numbers on the nose are so that the guys on the ground with the binoculars could identify the individual planes up in the air and who was doing right and who was going to get chewed out when they came back down. October 15th of 44, his crew flew from Louisiana up to Presque Isle. They went to, I think it was Goose Bay, and then across to Iceland, and then from Iceland down to Wales. I talked to some other guys while I was, that I met during my research work, and they said that that was about a 16-hour flight. They really had to be on their toes because German submarines and ships were sending false radio missions to try and get these guys off course, and they lost a lot of planes over the North Atlantic that just ran out of gas because they were given false information by the Germans. My dad was assigned to the 8th Air Force 91st Bomb Group and stationed in Bassingbourn, England. What I found really interesting about this picture, not just the fact that that's the B-17 he always talked about, peace or bust, but the positions of the crew are exactly the same they were in the other position. Everyone in the crew is in the same position. So the captain is in the front row, second from the right, Bill Partridge. I'm pretty sure he was the one that set it up and had his crew in the same position. While my dad was in training with the guys that got transferred over to the 91st Bomb Group, on November 2nd, that's a typo there, I'm sorry about that, that should be 1944, 37 planes from the 91st Bomb Group took off on a bombing mission to Mersburg, Germany. My dad told me he could remember standing out there watching the planes take off that morning, and after they were gone, they got an airplane with other new crews and they were doing their formation flying and learning their tactics. And like all of them with the maintenance and the ground crews, they were on the ground counting the planes when they came back. Well, on this particular day, the 91st Bomb Group was part of the 1st Air Division, and their planes got separated from the other two bomb groups. And while this was later in the war, in 1945, there were still Luftwaffe pilots going up. And on that particular day, they lost their fighter escort when they got separated, and the Luftwaffe found them. They lost 13 out of 37 B-17s that day. 5 of those crews were from the 323rd Squadron, my dad's squadron. And he told me going to bed that night was pretty tough because of all the empty bunks in the barracks. And he said that was what really drove it home to him, that this was real and that he might not be going home. This was war. He flew his first mission on November 16th of 1944, target Eichsweiler, Germany. The reason I put this picture in is you probably, if you've been following the 8th Air Force, recognize that plane. The Collins Foundation has been flying a remake of it for years, the 909. And my dad flew his first mission on the original 909. And of course, history of that plane is great. It flew, I believe, it was 140 missions without an abort. The ground crew chief got a brown star at the end of the war. And it had a reputation that it never lost a man in all of those missions. So I really found it amazing when I started doing this history and found out that he flew on this, because I had already visited the Collins 909 when I had come into Eugene Airport, and I went, holy jeez, that was a nice coincidence. As a radio man flying his missions, he said I was kind of isolated in that middle part of the plane. He said, you know, other than looking straight up, they did not have the 50 calibers in the radio room at that time. My dad flew on a B-17G model. But he said he could look out the side window and he could look up, and at times he could look out through the bomb bay and into, out the cockpit windows. And he said you still saw stuff that kind of, on, I think it was his 5th mission, there was a B-17 flying off their port wing about 50 feet, just a little above, tight formation for their gun protections. And he said he happened to look up, and the lead plane had a major in the co-pilot seat who happened to look down at him. He said, I kind of saluted, the major saluted back, a radio message came in. He said, I went down and took my notes, I looked out the window, no plane. And somebody in the back said, hey, so-and-so took a direct hit, they're going down. And my dad leaned up and looked out that window behind the wing, and he said all he could see was a whirling mass of metal and fire, and there was a big explosion, and it was gone. He said 10 guys, and they didn't know if any of them got out, bailed out, or if any of them were POW or He said, that made me think, 50 feet over, that would have been our plane. He said, I'll be honest with you, he said, I went to Mass or communion service before every mission. He said, because I just tried to prepare myself, because you just didn't, you had no control over it. One of the stories I shared, my father-in-law was infantry in World War II, a BAR man. We don't know much about his history, because again, he didn't talk much about it, but we know he served in the Battle of the Bulge. And he ended up getting his feet partially frozen, and he always had the club toes that curled in, partial disability. But he would, when we had family gatherings, like when our kids were baptized or made their first communion or had birthdays and we'd get together, Gordy, my father-in-law, my dad's nickname was Buddy, but I'd say, Buddy, you fly boys, you had it made. You go back to your base and you get warm chow and you had a warm bunk to sleep. And by God, I was out there in the mud or the snow or the ice and the rain, and you just had to take whatever you took. It, you were lucky. And my dad always looked at him and say, yeah, Gordy, we had it pretty good. It was like he wouldn't let him get baited into an argument. They came out to Oregon for our son's graduation from high school, and it was just a matter of time. We knew it was going to happen. And about the third day, right after breakfast, hey, buddy, you fly boys, you had it made. You went back to warm bunks and you had warm meals. And this time my dad looked at him and said, Gordy, you're right. I did have it better than you. I did get a warm meal. I did have a warm bunk. But I got to tell you, when you're at 28,000 feet and it's 50, 60 below zero and you're under attack and flak is exploding around you, you wish to hell you had a foxhole to crawl into. He said, but you couldn't. You just sat there and you took it. And Gordy looked at my dad and said, I never thought about that. And that was the end of it. What I wrote in the book, and which is true, is it doesn't make any difference if you served in the Army, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, the Navy. If you went through combat, you went through hell. And that's one of the things you all got to remember. And I'll say it again to all of you. Thank you for serving our country. I mean, I don't think that can be expressed often enough. That's one of the reasons I'm involved with the Honor Plate program, which I'll talk about later. The other thing that happened, my dad went through radio and gunnery school with a sergeant, I've got to get up to it, Marvin Knapp, K-N-A-P-P. And he got separated when they were assigned overseas, and Marvin went with a different bomb group and was stationed about 40 miles from where my dad was in Bassingbourn. My dad wrote him a letter, and that's the envelope that I found. It came back, it's marked deceased. I was able to check back because I found out what bomb group he flew with. And his plane and another plane trying to get in formation over England, the plane above them lost power or something and dropped right on their plane. And the mid-air explosion. And that happened all too often when, that damning was weather with planes trying to form up. And, look at that picture, there's another B-17 behind the one that's pretty clear. You can barely see it through the fog in the clouds. They lost a lot of men in accidents like that. The only two survivors from those B-17s, both tail gunners survived. They managed to get out the emergency hatch before it was too late, but everybody else perished. Some pictures of my dad at the base in Bassingbourn. You can see they had some mild weather, and you can see snow on the winter jackets and stuff. He said the weather, for the most part, it was terrible. It was the worst winter in Europe, 44, 45 winter, that they had had in 100 years, and that's where the Battle of the Bulge was fought and all that crap, and snow and ice and stuff too. In fact, when you study history, one of the reasons is the Germans were so successful in the Battle of the Bulge is the weather was so terrible, the Air Force was grounded. They couldn't give them any fighter support, they couldn't bomb their supply lines. On December 24th, 1944, the sky had cleared enough, the 8th Air Force declared a maximum effort. Everybody that could get into a B-17, cooks or whatever, if they were trained gunners, they put them on planes, all the spares. They took out over 2,000 heavy bombers that day, B-24s and B-17s with over 900 fighters in a maximum effort. It was the biggest effort of World War II for the 8th Air Force. And of course, they were targeting bridges, railroads, ammunition dumps, anything to disrupt the supplies that were being fed to the Germans to keep the missions going forward. That particular day, the weather was crappy in England, but they said it was clear over the continent. Well, they got clouds over the continent by the time the 8th Air Force got there, and a lot of the planes had to divert to secondary targets, and they're flying back to England, and there were planes starting to land in different airfields in France to get refueled, And my dad said, Captain Parker said, we can make it, don't worry. We got enough fuel, we'll make it. We calculated it. He said, we barely got out over the North Sea, one engine went out of fuel. We transferred that fuel, he said halfway across the second engine went dry. When the third engine went dry, the captain said, crew assume crash positions, because we're preparing to ditch. And my dad was in the radio room sending out the messages to Air Sea Rescue in case they went down, and all of a sudden he said, you know, we can make it, we're going to make it. And just across into England was an RAF base. They just radioed, we're coming in. My dad said they probably had a cup of fuel left on that plane. It was December 24th, Christmas Eve. He says, I spent 6 hours on guard duty with a frozen can of pineapple juice. That was all they had, because the base wasn't prepared. The 91st Bomb Group, none of the planes made it back to Bassingbourn that night because of weather. They were scattered all over at other bases, wherever they could land. In fact, the 8th Air Force wanted to put up another mission on December 25th. They couldn't get enough planes together to really order a mission, so they canceled and scrubbed the whole thing for the day. So my dad said they were trucked back to base, and they had ground crews actually go back later and fly the planes back to the base. So he said, at least on Christmas Day, we got to have our own meal. And he said, mainly all we wanted to do was sleep, because they had been up all night. A couple of quick stories on this. My dad didn't play much poker, but in December, he was playing poker in the barracks, and he said 5 cards dealt to him, and that's the hand.
No way.
Royal flush, ace of hearts. And he said, talk about have to try and keep a straight face. He's going, man, am I going to be able to send some money home? Air raid siren goes off right after they entered in. So he grabbed the money that was on the table and his cards and headed for the air raid shelter, and he showed the guys the cards, and he said, keep the money. Thank God that buzz bomb was going over. They were lucky. That patch is actually on the bottom left. Was the only part of my dad's flight jacket that I got. He clipped off that symbol for the 323rd Squadron. You can tell it's pretty ragged. That's why I put a picture of what it's supposed to look like in there. In the upper picture are a couple of coins I found in the box, but the main thing I saw in the middle was what intrigued me. That is a piece of flak that caught my dad under the right armpit. But it either had come from a distance and was fairly well spent when it came through the side of the plane and hit him, or it must have ricocheted. He said he was reaching up to make some kind of adjustment on a receiver or transmitter. He said it was like somebody hit him with a sledgehammer right under the armpit. He said, I hit the wall and I was down on the floor. All I could do is exhale. I couldn't breathe. He said, so I just, radio's hit. And they had the waist gunner come to check on him. And the waist gunner rolled him over, got his oxygen mask straightened out, told him to take little breaths, short breaths. So he started to get some oxygen in. And he said, there's a hole right in your flak jacket. Let me see what I got. He said, I don't see any blood. And my dad said, blood freezes fairly quick at 50, 60 below zero. But the guy poked around, and he said every time he poked around, he said, God, it felt like it was going right through my chest. He said, yeah, I'm laying there thinking I'm dying. I've had it. Because he saw a lot of guys taken off the B-17s that had been hit by flak. He said, finally the guy said, hold still, I feel something hard. And my dad said, yeah, a rib. The guy pulled, and he came out with that piece of flak. And that's blown up, obviously, because it's on there, but it's actually about the size of my thumb. And you can still see the markings, machine markings on that piece of flak. He was lucky. He said he was so bruised he could barely raise his arm for 2 weeks, and as I tracked his records, there was about a 2-week period he didn't fly. He was flying lead plane at that time. But anyways, he survived. Obviously, the Lord had other plans for him. He got his, after he finished his 30th mission, he went back to the States. He was actually on a ship in the North Atlantic on VE Day. They offered him a commission, the second lieutenant, to train other radio operators coming over, not knowing that the war was going to be over in about 5-6 weeks. But he found out that if he took that commission, he had to fly 5 more combat missions. And he politely told them where to put the commission. He was going home. And that's one of the reasons. On May 31st of 45, while he was on leave, he married my mother. That's a picture of my dad with his hat on, Uncle Roger next to him, Uncle Ralph sitting on Grandma's lap, and my grandfather sitting there with the dog in his lap. I want to talk about what I consider one of the most rewarding parts of my journey in writing this book, and that's the other veterans I got to meet. I am what I tell everybody, I am an accidental author. After a year of traveling and meeting and researching and reading and watching videos that I bought, I got a hell of a library at home about B-17s in the 8th Air Force. After a year, my wife came in the office and looked around, and this is a quote: "You got enough crap in here, you could write a book." I had never thought about it. I didn't do this with the intent of writing a book. But I met Joe Harlech up in Olympia, Washington. He served with the 91st Bomb Group in Bastille, England with the 324th Squadron as a photographer. He brought over 2,000 black and white photos home with him. He flew 5 missions on B-17s because there was a problem. The strike camera was in the radio room, and the radio operator was supposed to trigger the strike camera when the bombs were dropped. Well, a lot of times the radio operator was a little bit busy with other things and forgot, and the commanding general at the time, I think it was Ira Eager, said, "No strike photos, no credit for the mission." Almost caused a mutiny with the crews. And Joe Harlech ended up flying 5 missions and studying the wiring and stuff, and he's the one that ended up having the electrical system for the bomb site tied into the release cameras, so that when the bombs were released, the camera went off. They put those in all the planes throughout the 8th Air Force, and Joe got an accommodation from the 8th Air Force for his work. I went up and he allowed me to use pictures from his collection. He worked with families of the 91st Bomb Group for years that would call and say, "Do you have a picture of Dad's plane?" You know, and one of the pictures he showed me was a picture of a B-17 with no tail section, and it was from a strike camera, looking down at it. It was going down. The whole crew was lost. He says, "Do I send this picture to the family?" And I told him, "They're looking for closure. At least they know this was the plane their dad was on." And he told me later he got a hell of a nice thank you for the family after sending him that photo. But, let's see if I can get through this. Joe had prostate cancer, just like my dad. And he had it while he was helping me. And I would call to check to see how he was doing. And one weekend I couldn't get hold of him. And on Monday his wife Jenny said, "We were in the hospital all weekend, Mike. The cancer has spread. His heart's going to give out before the cancer finally takes him, but he's in his final days." And about 5-6 days later, I called to see how he was doing, and she said, "He's having a good day. He's on oxygen, he's in a wheelchair, he's down in his office, he's photoshopping pictures for your book." And I said, "For God's sakes, tell him to lay down, take it easy." She said, "No, this is something he wants to do and he needs to do." Well, the following Monday, I opened up my mail, and there is a CD with 80 pictures already photoshopped, because these were in the neighborhood, if I remember correctly, like 70 pixels. And to put them in a book, you had to get them up to 300 pixels. So he was kind enough to be working on his computer, and he knew what he was doing to upgrade those photos for me. So I called the next day. Jenny answered the phone, and I said, "Hey, can I talk to Joe? And I want to thank him." She said, "Thanks for calling, Mike." And I said, "Well, I got the envelope with the pictures. I want thanks for calling, Mike." I said, "Jenny, is everything okay?" She said, "Thanks for calling." So I called back later. He had just died. That was his final thing he did, gifting me with those photos for that book. There was a letter in the envelope too, giving me permission to use any photos from his collection that I wanted for the book, and he needed that kind of stuff for the publisher in order to get the pictures in the book. I met Dolph Boyer, another member of the 91st Bomb Group. He was in Roseburg, Oregon, a radio technician. And I had a list of the B-17s my dad had flown on and stuff, so I said, "Do you recognize any of these?" Boom, boom, boom. 5 of the B-17s on that list. He said, "Yeah, I serviced the radio on those planes." He was with the 323rd Squadron. So I said, "Did you know my dad?" He said, "Well, when did your dad come to work?" I said, "October of 44, and he finished up in March of 45. He says, "I probably met your dad," but he said, "Mike, I got to tell you, the ground crews came over in 1942 to set up the base. We were there till the war ended in 45. He said, "In the first part of the war, we'd send our plane up with the crew, and at the end of the day, when the planes were coming back, we'd go to the hard stand and wait, and no plane would be there." He said, "We lost so many planes and so many crews." He said, "It got to the point we didn't want to get to know them personally anymore. We didn't want to know about their kids or their wives or their sweethearts. It was too hard, and we didn't know if they were dead, if they were evading, or if they were a prisoner of war." He said, "We helped the crews." He said, "We'd have candy bars and apples and put on the plane and stuff and everything." He said, "I probably did meet your dad," but he said, "You got to remember, there were thousands that went through those bases." And he said, "With the flight crews, they either finished their missions and went home, or they didn't come back from the mission." Marty Guerin, I met in Eugene. He was a pilot with the 94th Bomb Group, actually flew 2 missions on D-Day, and shared with me, looking through the overcast, what it was like to look down at the English Channel when it was filled with those thousands of ships and everything. It was amazing. But he helped with a section of the book going through the pre-flight of the B-17 and the startup and takeoff. Both Dolph, Marty are as well now deceased. Glenn Pine, I met down in Klamath Falls. He flew with a different bomb group early in the war and was on the first Schweinfurt mission. He shared with me that before they dropped their bombs on their first mission, every gun on the plane was already empty. They had gone through their ammunition with all the fighter attacks. He said all we had coming back off the bomb run were empty guns to point at the Germans. He said, I saw so many planes go down that day, and if you study the history, they lost 60 heavies that day, 60 crews. Can you imagine turning on the news tonight to find out we lost 600 men in Afghanistan today? Thank God they didn't have the instant communication back in World War II. He ended up re-listing. He got back to the States and got bored in the Air Force, so he re-upped to go back in combat, and he went to the 91st Bomb Group. And on his 4th mission, finding out that most crews hadn't even fired their guns because the Luftwaffe had been pretty well decimated, the Luftwaffe still was active. On their 4th mission, he was in a plane, upper flying high formation, when a bunch of FW-190s came out, started lobbing rockets into him and stuff, and in a matter of about 60 seconds, 5 B-17s went down. His plane, he said he took a hit in the tail. He got open in the hip to his knee. His right arm got shattered. He said, I passed out. When I came to, the plane was going down. He said, smoke pouring past the tail section. He looks, his parachute is shattered by shrapnel. It's just all torn up. But on his first 25 missions, he learned to keep a spare at the waist store. So he said, I crawled over the tail into the waist section. Don't mean to be too graphic here. He said the waist gunner had half his head gone. He was obviously dead. The bulk turret was pointed like the guy came out, but the hatch was still there. And he said the radio operator was hanging in and out of the radio compartment. He said, I grabbed that chute, I put it on my chest strap, kicked out the door, and out I went. He ended up being captured. In fact, a bunch of civilians captured him, and he said, I thought I was going to be killed, and a German woman came up and kind of quieted everybody down, wrapped his leg with some kind of scarf she had on, and he said, I passed out. When I came to, he said, I was in a bombed-out rail station with a couple other guys laying on the ground and several other POWs and 2 German guards. And he said about 50 German civilians came up demanding the guards turn over the airmen and they were going to hang them. And he said they racked their guns and basically saved their life. But he ended up spending the balance of the war in a POW camp and ended up on the Nazi death march at the end of the war when Himmler had the POW camps empty. For 88 days, he marched to nowhere. And his leg wound finally opened up again. They put him on a cart, and he said all the guys that went on carts and were pulled out, they never saw again. So he figured, I'm done. When he came to, he was in an old service station in Belgium, being taken care of by citizens, if you will, and he was finally liberated when the Russians came in and sent back to the States. Don Fisher was a radio operator, ball turret gunner in Eugene. I met him. He was shot down on the 7th mission. He evaded capture for a year and a half in occupied France. He was taken in by the French underground, by other farmers and their families. In fact, he was finally liberated when the Allies took Paris. The underground took him in. They said, we're not going to give you the Americans. They're all drunk. We're going to give you some British group and get rid of you. He said, when he finally got turned over to the Americans, he said, my first 3 days back with the U.S. troops, I was in interrogation. They thought I was a damn German spy because nobody could evade capture that long. They had to fly somebody from his base in England over to Paris to ID him. During that year and a half, his family was first notified he was missing in action. After 6 months, they gave him a notice he was killed in action. They paid him the $10,000 life insurance policy. His fiancée ended up meeting another guy and got married. He could have no communications with anybody while he was in France because if he gave away the underground positions, the Germans would have killed them all. But life turned out good. He met another woman, and at the time I interviewed him, he had been married for 63 years. Just fascinating, these people I met. The last story I want to share is a guy who is named Charlie Hudson. He was a major. My dad shared in his tape that on February 22nd, as I found this out in the research, but it was on his 22nd mission, which ended up on February 22nd at 45. He said, we had clear skies. Instead of bombing through the overcast from 25,000 feet, he said, we were given orders to bomb from 11,000 feet. He said, yeah, we could see the targets, but he said, boy, could the Germans see us. But he said, we were flying lead plane. He said, they clobbered the target at marshalling yard in Stendal, Germany. The major in the nose, the bombardier, sends a message to my dad in the radio compartment, send a message back to headquarters, wizard prang, which is English term for bombs on direct target. You know, they nailed it. My dad said, I can't do that. That violates radio code. And he said, you better do it. I'm a major and I'm giving you an order. My dad said, sir, I can't do it. I'll get in trouble. It violates our radio code. The pilot, or the co-pilot on the mission, was another major. He's got his head sticking out of the window. This picture was taken, I found it in my research, February 22nd of 1945, and that's Major Hudson sticking his nose out of the little window on the top of the B-17 talking to the major. So they're both majors. Said, Sergeant, Major Hudson's giving you direct order, you better obey it. My dad said, no. And Charlie Hudson finally crawled from the nose of the plane into the radio compartment, and my dad said, you give me a written order. He wrote on a piece of paper and gave it to my dad, so my dad sent the message back. The commanding general of the 8th Air Force at that time was a gentleman known as Jimmy Doolittle. Guess who was listening to the radio transmissions that day to find out about the success of the strike? General Doolittle did not find the message wizard praying particularly humorous. He called Colonel Ray at the 91st Bomb Group headquarters and chewed his ass out. And guess who was waiting at the hard stand when my dad's plane pulled in? My dad got grounded for 2 weeks for violating radio protocol. He did manage to fly 2 combat missions during that 2-week period. And Major Hudson was fined and disciplined as well, confined to base. I'm doing this research work and I'm getting the 8th Air Force Historical Society newsletter. And I open it up and there's an article that says, retired Colonel Charles Hudson, Niles, Michigan, talked to some group about his experiences in World War II. 94 years old. I said, it can't be a coincidence. I got on the phone, I finally tracked down the phone number on the computer. I called up, I said, is this Charles Hudson? The guy said, yeah. I said, I'm working on this book and I'm trying to confirm the story my dad shared. And I said, I believe you're the one that, no, I'm Charles Hudson Jr. I said, well, is your dad still alive? He said, yeah, he's in the hospital getting a pacemaker put in. I said, my God, is he going to be okay? He said, that ornery son of a bitch, he'll be fine. So he said, call back in a week. I called back a week, the daughter-in-law answers the phone. She says, what are you doing? What's this all about? I finally told her, I said, your father-in-law was a bombardier on a mission my dad flew on. I'm trying to confirm this story that's famous in the 91st Bomb Group. And she said, well, Dad's not with us anymore. Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. I didn't really think he'd pass away. Oh, no. He's not with us anymore. I said, could this have anything to do at his age with dementia or Alzheimer's? She said, yeah, he has Alzheimer's. And she said, we had to put him in a care facility. Well, wait a minute. You want to talk about World War II? He's living it right now. So I call up the nursing home. He answers, this is all true, folks. It's in the book. He answers the phone. I said, is this Major Charles Hudson? Actually, I said, is this Charlie Hudson? He said, yes. And I said, Major Charles Hudson? Who is this? So I told him who it is and what I was doing. And he kept saying, what? What? And I thought, he's going to hang up on me. So I said, Major Charles Hudson, 91st Bomb Group. He said, yes. I said, do you remember being stationed in Bassingbourn, England? He said, oh, we're having hard times back here. We're having hard times. I said, do you remember a mission? I said, February of 1945, marshalling yard, Stendal, Germany, clear weather. You bombed from 13,000 feet. He said, man, I remember looking through the bomb site and there was a switch engine pulling in the yard. He said, I saw it disappear. We nailed it. We clobbered the target that day. I said, do you remember us sending a radio message, wizard praying? Oh, I got in trouble for that one. I said, well, tell me about it. He said, why are you asking? I said, my dad was the radio operator on that mission. I said, Frank Pungercar, he went by the nickname Buddy. There's so many men, so many men. He said, I remember that damn sergeant. I gave him a direct order, and I had to crawl clear to the radio compartment and give him a written order before he sent the message. He said, yeah, but the colonel was waiting for us when we got back to the base. I said, I know, my dad got confined to base for 2 weeks. He said, well, they confined me to base and fined me $75 too. He said, but you know, he says, I was 25 years old and most of them damn officers, they were all in their 20s and young whippersnappers, they didn't know shit. So he said, well, I took a command car and I went to London for 2 weeks. I verified this with other people. Yeah, he said they weren't real happy with me when I came back, but I was a damn good bombardier and they needed me. I mean, just unbelievable what I have found when I was doing the work on this book. Charlie is also passed on now. On May 22nd, let's jump ahead to May 22nd, 2010. In January of 2010, I was still working on finishing up the book, and I told my wife I have one New Year's resolution for this year. I want to fly on a B-17. She said, that's kind of spendy, isn't it? I said, well, I belong to the EAA, and I think I could fly for around $330, $350. I said, I've already gone on the internet, and the aluminum overcast will be in Hillsdale, Oregon, in May, on May 22nd. I said, I want to fly out. And she looked at me and she said, go ahead and do it because you'll always regret it if you don't. Well, that morning, you can see the tarmac out there. It was not particularly good weather. In fact, I was the first one to arrive on scene. Told them my dad had been a radio operator and I really like to sit in the radio seat. And they said, you're now the radio operator on this flight. I couldn't talk to anybody, but I got to sit in the compartment in the seat and everything on takeoff and landing. And the weather finally cleared enough that we got out there and we turned the props on that B-17. I found out that takes a little bit of oomph. Then you guys that have done it know what I'm talking about. The nice part about being on the first flight is I'm on the flight during the full warm-up. I was going through what Marty Guerin had told me about pre-flight and everything, and while I couldn't hear what was going on in the cockpit, in my mind, I was hearing what was going on in the cockpit, because I had already heard it from the B-17 pilot. It was only like 20, 22 minutes in the air, but it's a flight I'll never forget. And that's one of the reasons I follow the progress of what's going on here with the B-17 Alliance in restoring this B-17. The B-17s are obviously something I'm very fond of, but that's a part of American history. Whether they're flying or whether they're static display, we've got to keep them available for the public. If you flew a B-24, no offense, my dad always said the best escort we could ever have was a group of B-24s in our formation because the fighters went after them first. I guess they were a little easier to knock down. But doesn't mean the B-17 was invincible, of course. They lost, thousands of B-17s in World War II as well. But that's the story behind my book. This book changed my life. The veterans I met just grabbed my heart. My dad was gone already. So many of them reminded me of my father. And one of the veterans who didn't get in the book, he ended up serving in the Army, but I talked to him back in my hometown of Sheboygan, Wisconsin. There had been a newspaper article. He had served on Patton command team as a Jeep driver. And after the war was over and there was this little issue of Russians in the East Berlin and Americans and Allies in West Berlin, he got lost. And he ended up being captured by the Russians. And he was held by the Russians for 2 weeks before he got back to the American lines. So anyways, I interviewed him and talked to him just to find out his story. And he said, have you ever heard of the Honor Flight program? No, what the hell's that? And he went on to share about being invited by the Honor Flight group, Stars and Stripes Honor Flight out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He shared how he got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get on a bus with 25 other veterans and their guardians, escorts, taken down to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, ended up in a group of 150 World War II veterans and hundreds of people at 6 o'clock in the morning at the airport welcoming them on their honor flight and thanking them for their service. He went on to describe going to the World War II Memorial and seeing the Korea and Vietnam, the changing of the guard at Arlington and being flown back home. He said, I didn't get back home till almost midnight. I was totally exhausted. But he said, nobody had ever thanked me for my service before. It was a trip of a lifetime. And hearing his voice and watching his face as he talked about this, I told my wife, this is something I want to get involved in. I know some of you who have been on your honor flight, I'm happy for you. For those of you veterans who haven't been on an honor flight yet, you're part of Portland Honor Flight here in Salem. I'd urge you to get on the internet, type in Honor Flight of Portland, find their website. You can get information about their next honor flight. You can get applications on there. I'm in charge, or I was in charge. I founded South Willamette Valley Honor Flight, where we cover Lane, Lynn, Lincoln, and Benton counties, so just south of you folks. I was the director from 2012 until July of last year, of 16. And a gentleman, Ed Bach, has taken that position. I'm still on the board as founder and public relations manager. But we have raised the money. If veterans fly free on these honor flights, we have transported from our 4-county area between October 12 and October of this year 506 veterans. We started taking Korean War veterans in May of 2015, and last year, October of 16, we took our first Vietnam veterans. I don't know where Portland is right now, if they're just taking World War II veterans or if they started Korean War veterans. But again, an email to them or a phone call, you can find out. But I really urge you, you served our country, you deserve to go on your honor flight. I'll take questions. Because that's the end of my formal presentation.
I had a question, but I got so much more information I forgot what it was. But I'm going to make you a deal.
What's that?
Well, I happen to work for the Collins Foundation.
Right.
And I will try to get you a ride from wherever they're coming into here. So it won't be a 22-minute ride.
They were in Eugene last summer. 2
Yeah,
days.
yeah.
We had the B-24, B-17, B-25, and the P-51.
Yeah.
And we had an honor flight table set up at the Eugene Airport for 2 days. So for 2 days, I watched people signing up, taking off, coming back, signing up. On Sunday, I got there right after church, and one of the guys at the table who had been covering it says, I think they're going up on one more flight, and then they're done for the day. I wonder what Millie would say. I wonder what she would say. So I walked in and I said, you got any room on the next flight? And they still had 2 positions open. Geez, I really want to do this. I really want to. We've been married 50 years as of August, okay? And I called her on the cell phone. I said, honey, this is the last flight they're going up on. This is the 909, the replica of my dad's plane, and there's two seats open. And she said, yeah, and how much? I can't remember, it was like 380. Anyways, I'll leave it up to you. I know what that meant. So I finally just said, okay, I'll pass. So I passed. I'd love to ride on that plane. If you can arrange it, I'll give you a big hug, I'll tell you that.
Ask Ed.
John got, Richard and I ride in 2010.
Okay.
We flew from Redding, California to Corvallis.
Oh, those are the great flights.
30 minutes. I was 19 years old, way back. I sat there, what am I doing here? My God! Wow! I couldn't believe it.
My 2 stepbrothers took Dad to, what do they call it, Air Adventure in Oshkosh, with the EAA. And they surprised him. They said, we're going to buy a ticket and we're going to get you on that plane. You're going to fly. And my dad said, I'll walk around the outside, I'll take a look at it, but I will not even go in it once I was flying. He said, you guys don't understand. When I got off my 30th mission back in 1945, I did kiss the ground. He said, and I swore I would never get back on one of these again, and I won't. And he didn't. He walked around and let him take pictures underneath the nose and stuff, but he would not even go inside that plane.
I was assigned to the ball team at 24. So I got to March Field. We never saw a ball shirt, never school. Oh,
Yeah.
got to March Field. What's this? My God, I was 19 years old. What the hell did I get myself into?
A tight position.
My dad, on one of the practice missions before they started combat, they were flying out over the channel or something. They got a radio transmission that there could be some German fighters. And they were flying short, one man on the crew that day, somebody had gotten sick. So the pilot said, radio, get in the ball turret, guard our belly. My dad said, I had never even been in a ball turret before, much less fired the gun. He said, so I got there and you point the guns down and he said, open up the hatch. I got in. He said, they closed the hatch and I knew enough how to operate it. And he says, I started to rotate it and I couldn't breathe. the oxygen hose had gotten flipped off. And again, all you can do is exhale, and he said, "Get me the hell out of here!" And he swung the guns down, and the waist gunner was still there, so he popped the hatch, and my dad said, I crawled out, and I said, I'm not going back down there. And the pilot, who was Captain Fartridge, Lieutenant Fartridge at that time, said, "You got to get down there. This is direct order." He said, "Sir, I'll take any other gun position on the plane, but I'm not going back down in that ball turret." He said, "This could be a court-martial offense." He said, "Then court-martial me." He says, "I'm a damn good radio operator, I know that." He says, "And I'll take any other gun, but I'm not going back in that ball turret." My dad said they landed, and there was never a word said about it. And he ended up flying, because Partridge, as a captain, ended up flying lead planes too. And I think on my dad's 30 missions, he probably flew 14 to 16 of his missions with Captain Partridge. So yeah, it's a tight position. I've never, of course, when you get on a B-17, even static on the ground, can't go in the tail, can't go in the ball turret. I'd love to be able to squeeze in one of those sometimes just to see it. I can't imagine sitting in one of those for 8-9 hours or something like that.
The worthless place, worthless turret we had. The sight windows are up in space.
Yep.
And if keep moving, you shouldn't see shit. It was a worthless. It's only a psychological object to see.
Did anybody use the relief tube in front of you?
Oh.
Don't got it. You take one piss and boom.
Yep, everything froze up. I've heard stories about that.
Back at the base, upside down a pail of water. Hands behind his hand. Pail of water. Good shot. Good shot. He didn't do it again. It was almost drowned him.
Another quick story, because I told you my dad had me laughing and stuff. They were on a mission to Berlin. I can't remember which one it was. And whatever he had for breakfast didn't set. And he had to go. And I don't mean using the relief tube. He says, I finally radioed the pilot and said, "Radio has to relieve himself. I need to leave my station now, or I'm going to fill my uniform or my flight suit and everything. You got permission. Where do you go?" So he says, I finally opened up the door to the bomb bay, took off my flak helmet, sat it down. He said, "You talk about stripping down at 40 below zero. You want to get done and get dressed again fast." He said, by the time I resuited, my flak helmet is frozen solid. He said, the dumbest thing I did was keep it in the radio compartment, because by the time we got back from the mission, it was thawing out. He ended up getting a shovel and burying the whole, and he had to buy a new flak helmet, pay for it himself. He said, what I should have done is thrown it off the bomb bay when they dropped the bombs and let the Germans have it. So yeah, you know, if you've never been in a B-17, and I hope most of you have with the projects we're working on here and stuff. I remember I got my wife in the Seattle B when it was in one of the hangars being restored for the Seattle Air and Space Museum. She walked through it, especially going through that bomb bay. I said, okay, just stand there for a second. Now picture yourself in all that gear with the fleece-lined jackets and your flak jacket and everything on. I said, you're carrying an oxygen bottle in one hand. I said, think about what the hell, I mean, people don't know and don't appreciate it unless it's short. So the book was written to keep alive that part of our history, the air war over Europe, because most people, they hear about, you know, Pearl Harbor and Iwo Jima and Normandy and stuff. What they don't realize is the 8th Air Force during the air war of Europe lost more airmen than the Marine Corps lost in all of their battles in the Pacific. I mean, they were sacrificed in the first part of the war, and especially just before D-Day. We had to control the skies over Normandy. For the 3 months prior to D-Day in 1944, the 8th Air Force was specifically given targets that they knew the Luftwaffe had to come up and defend, so that the Allied fighters could take on the Luftwaffe. The 8th Air Force lost 10,000 airmen in 3 months. 10,000 airmen. And so that's what I say, they were literally sacrificed for the sake of the war. So that's why I wrote the book, to keep that story alive. I'm working on a second book. I've met quite a few of the veterans that have gone on their honor flights, honored me in turn by sharing their life stories with me over a series of lunches or coffee and stuff like that. And I've got 8 of them right now that are willing to share their stories so I can put them in a book. But I'm finding though it's a little lopsided, Pacific theater versus Atlantic theater right now. I need to find more that served in the European theater, because I think it's 6-2 right now that served in the Atlantic, including an Army and Army and Marine Corps veteran, and the others are Navy veterans. 2 of them Pearl Harbor survivors that shared the stories with me. One of them served on the USS Oklahoma and was 3 decks down on December 7th of 1941. He lost an uncle on the ship, and his other uncle was one of the last ones that was rescued, cut out of the bottom of the ship before they just had to give up the rescue efforts. So those are stories that need to be shared, part of the history that I'm trying to keep alive in this country.
Other questions?
Did any of the people that you interviewed speak about those shuttle missions where they took off from England and landed, bombed Germany and landed in Russia and then
I'm familiar with what you're talking about, but none of them were involved in that shuttle. But I've read about it, in books and on the internet and stuff.
I obtained a book recently that was about that, and there were a lot of prisoners taken, and the prison camps were being overrun by Allied forces. The prisoners were forced to the east by the Germans and never got back. They had no idea how many of them died.
Yeah, until I interviewed Clem Pine down in Klamath Falls, I had never heard of the Nazi death march. I hadn't heard about Himmler emptying the camps. He was going to use the POWs as a bargaining tool with the Allies, and he wanted to surrender to the Allies, not to the Russians. I mean, they knew what the Russians were going to do. Anyways, Clem is the only one that talked about that. I always heard about the death march, the Pound Death March, what the Japanese did and stuff, but they have no records of how many Allied POWs were lost during those death marches that winter, because what took the news media at the end of World War II wasn't that death march, it was what they were finding in the concentration camps and the death camps. And that's where the publicity was focused on.
I wonder how many theaters saw German PW camp was big.
I-
4 of them near our area in Minnesota. They looked like kings.
Yeah, the German POWs, for the most part, did not have it all that back. I mean, they were put on work assignments, working on farms and stuff. A lot of the German POWs did not go back at the end of the war. They were happy here in America. And again, for those Americans and other allies that served time in German POW camps, from talking to only one survivor of the Japanese POW camp so far, and then reading other stories, you were lucky if you were taken by the Germans, unless the SS started playing games and experiments. The one veteran that went on our April 2013 honor flight, his name was Andy Andrews. He was a bombardier with the 381st Bomb Group. 7th mission was shot down and ended up serving 11 months in Stalag-Luft 1 in Barth, Germany, right on the north shore of Germany. There was a flak school located right next to it, and that's why the Germans put POW camp there. The flak school was never bombed all of World War II, but there was an air base there. The commanders of the POW camp met with the German commanders and had a fairly decent relationship. They were being run by the Luftwaffe, so fellow flyers, if you will. They knew the Russians were coming, and they wanted to get the hell out of there. So they met, and the American or the Allied commanders of the POW camp said, "We'll take charge of the camp. You guys leave, and we'll take it until the Russians come in." When the Russians come in, they didn't liberate that camp right away. And finally, I think it was General Doolittle that set this up. He said, "We got called and we were told to form in groups of 10 and to be ready to move as soon as they were ordered, and all of a sudden they heard planes and they look up and here comes all these B-17s. And these B-17s started circling that airfield. They'd come in and land, 10 guys would get on it because they had stripped off the guns and stuff and take off. The 8th Air Force liberated Stalag-Luft 1. And one of the flights that was, one of the groups that was doing that was the 381st Bomb Group, Andy's group. So that's how he ended up being liberated at the end of the war. I just spoke at his service about 6 weeks ago. I'm going to turn this over. I'll stick around and talk with anybody after the meeting's over as long as you want to talk. My book is available. It does sell for $20, and $4 off of each sale goes right back to the Honor Flight program to get our veterans back to DC.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, next month, one of the people that most of us know is Ole Olson and his wife. Ole has a firearms collection that he's been wanting to share with us, and so on December 21st, we will be here at our regular time, 10 to roughly noonish, and Ole will be sharing that with him. And I think Bruce, who was back here a little bit earlier, he's going to be having some stuff to talk with Ole about, and that should be a pretty good presentation. So even though hopefully you'll have all your Christmas presents wrapped and your trees up and everything, so come on down here for that. We had a couple of hands that came
Did
up.
your battery just die?
And you're also news. So if you could just stand and talk for a minute.
I'd like to introduce this gentleman. This is Scotty Wojcik. He's a new docent here with us in the museum, and he's going to be on board on Tuesdays.
Yay!
So, welcome, Scotty. He's also a B-52 guy, and he's got a few things here he wants to show.
I've had this stuff just sitting in my attic for the last 26, 27 years.
Is it working? We got it working now, and we like you to look at the camera when you're talking to the camera.
You need, can you, here, you want to hold that?
Okay.
Right up to your mouth. Right up there.
Okay. How's this?
Good.
Okay. I'm the proverbial turn the light out when you leave. I was a tail gunner on a B-52. I was in Thailand in May of 1975, and I watched history being made. I watched the South Vietnamese Air Force fly their planes into Thailand, and we took the last B-52 out of Thailand over to Guam 2 days later. And being in the tail section, I'm way in the back, so I was the last man out. Like I said, had all this gear. I thought it doesn't pertain to B-17s, but it does stay in the realm of aviation and the tail gunner. They don't have them anymore. The Air Force shut the tail gunners down in 1995. So I wasn't prepared to talk. I was just going to bring this stuff over, and
I know you
so I can be prepared, like some other time to tell some stories. Like I spent 11 days in Hawaii with in a B-52. We were taking one from Dyess Air Force Base in Texas over to Guam. It was 17 and a half hours. And we were 350 miles northwest of Honolulu at about 12:30 at night. And we had an explosion in the right wing, and we lost an air duct, and we started going down. We had just rendezvoused with our last tanker to get fuel, and they called Air Sea Rescue, and they sent out a 130 to make contact with us, and we kind of limped into Hickam Air Force Base at about 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, at about 6:30 in the morning, we got a newspaper delivered to the door at the barracks where I was at. Opened up, and here on the front page is a B-52 that says "Nukes on Hawaiian Soil." Like everybody figured that every B-52 was flying around with nuclear bombs. And the commanding general, or the commanding general of Hickam, tried to force, give my aircraft commander to hurry up and get out of Hickam. And he said, "Captain," he said, "I want you off my island in 40 or 36 hours or whatever." And we spent 11 days there. So he wasn't very happy with us. And I had a patch on my helmet bag, which is kind of like a picture of your life in aviation, especially in SAC. And one's missing. I think I know where it's at. I'm going to try and find it, but our plane was called last one-time good deal. So that was it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And so that we're almost done here. And what I'd like to do is normally at the end of each of these get-togethers, we have what we call a share time. So please stick around, get another cup of coffee, get some munchies, and talk with each other. It's the sharing of the stories that has become almost legendary. When I was at the parade on last Saturday down in Albany, there were 2 or 3 people that came up to me, and when they found out I was part of this group, they had heard about conversations here and friendships that have formed here. And so this place is becoming known within the veterans community as an interesting place to come, share, learn, find out about stuff, and see about our beautiful, beautiful airplane. So with that, there was, I think, one other, oh, yes. There are guys that are wearing these blue shirts that say crew member. If this is your first time here, or if you haven't done it yet, if you'd like to have a tour of the museum and the B-17, come up to one of us after we're done here. We do tours. That's part of why we're here Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Also, if you belong to some group that would like to have a group tour, get a hold of Terry either by email or by phone. And you can always pick up the business card out front. We've got a number of brochures of our current newsletter and of events coming up. So again, hope to either see you on the 9th of December or the 21st of December, as well as out into January. And thank you very much. Have a great day. And
I have something I want to say.
Okay.
Okay,
Darren usually gets the last word.
I always gotta get the last word, right? So,
Where's Mike? Where'd he go?
Right here.
There he is. Did you say something about wanting to be in a ball turret?
You've got one.
Yeah, we got a ball
I
turret.
didn't even think about that.
Yeah, we have a ball turret. It's under restoration, and I just happened to go check on it, and it's stabilized. And for about $50,000, you can get in it. I'm kidding. But if you want to get in it, Dave over there would like to videotape that.
I'll do it.
Okay,
You have
but
to
you
stay
gotta
in
sign a
overnight.
release form for me so I can take the
Will I get
picture,
back
right?
out again? It's
So I just wanted to thank you for being here. I said last month that a lot of times Coffee Club makes me stop and sort of go, this is why I do my job. This is why I love what I do. And I think you have a lot of that same passion for the stories. And I am not a historian, I am not an aviation buff, but I love what we do here at B-17 Alliance. And I got all my passion for America, like you, by interviewing the veterans. And I really think that there's a lot of commonality there. And you know, if you wanted to join our team with what you collected, I would totally want to sit down and talk with you about that, because it's so similar to what we're doing, and if we could combine our efforts, that would be very beneficial. So anyway, after we close here, then I think Dave wants to take you to the ball turret, and we'll let you gently get inside of it and videotape that.
I hope so. Somebody take a picture.
If you can. He might be short enough. What were the stipulations, Paul? 5'6"? Oh, okay.
I'm 5'4 1/2.
Are you really? Okay. You might have to take those cowboy boots off.
For years I said
Okay,
I was 5'5"
thank you,
with a
everybody.
driver's license, and finally about age 60 I went, shit, I've never seen 5'5" and I never will.
Thanks, everybody. See you next month.
fitting it.
Cell phone out of there in the wallet right away.
There you go.
Okay.
Because you lose all that when you went upside down anyway, right?
Now, if you want to
So
look in
it's
here,
stable, it's not gonna move,
Look over that.
but you
Right
can see
here,
that's where your butt
right
goes.
there, left heel, right there.
Left shoulder, feet going to stirrup.
Feet going to stirrup.
Is
Yep,
that great?
right
You
there.
can swing from right here or up here. Yes. Okay, that's good.
All right. Got a foot in there. All right. Watch your head now. Come in.
Oh my God.
And so how tall did you say you were?
5'4.5".
5'4.5".
Well, that's good. That's
Up high.
the shortest guy on the crew.
Get your heel up in there.
All
Trying to
right.
figure out where to put it.
Put it up.
I think it's over here.
Your heel, right up on there. There you go, just like
Okay, I
that.
got it.
Right
Just
here.
like you're gonna give
Yep,
birth.
I see the other one now.
Okay, yep.
Watch your head.
Yeah, this is
That's
a
it.
really interesting view down here.
Butt all the way down.
I gotta get out of here too then.
Gluteus.
Wait, we gotta take a bunch of pictures. You can't go anywhere.
And you gotta roll your head
Right up
forward.
here. Yeah,
Whoa.
and you'd have a big old gun sight hanging right down in front of your face, and you're looking through that gun sight, and you'd be pulling the gun
This is
triggers on
amazing.
either side.
No wonder my dad didn't want to stay.
See, and see your direction of your barrels here. That's the direction that you would be doing. And you would roll, you could roll it like that.
Okay.
So,
What are these handles right here on each side?
I think the cocking handles for
Cocking
cocking the
handles for the
weapon.
guns.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Now, we've got the hatch somewhere.
And you can spin yourself around 360 degrees.
Right. I know you had to get it pointed down with the guns, so that you can get in the hatch while you're in
Yes,
the plane.
right.
It's
We've
here.
got the hatch.
And
Yeah, it's
then
around
normally
there.
to get out of
It's
it,
gotta
they
be
would
out
roll
there.
this thing around and
But
it
it
goes
doesn't
straight up
fit
into the
because-
plane.
Right.
We had it.
Yeah, and it doesn't fit proper right now.
Oh, doesn't it?
No, not exactly.
Is it worse?
I'm just getting
Just to
I
give
think
you
it
more
needs to be
visibility
reworked
out
a
of there.
little.
The holes on the top right here.
I'll just do this.
That would be a plexiglass window there.
dark.
Okay,
but-
just to give you a little more visibility.
You know, we can turn him in there. We can turn him facing that way to your
By
light.
the time you get the gun sight.
Would that work?
Okay, Mike, you're on
Well,
video.
We
What
could
do you
just
think?
pivot this
I think this is great.
Give him a
I'm just trying to
spin.
picture
Wanna do that?
somebody in this
He
position.
should be
for
okay in there now that
79
he's
hours.
in.
Yeah, long
He
time.
should sit there fine. If we
Very
want to
tight.
spin him around so that
My
David
statistics
can.
and studies saying that
Come my
though, as
way?
far as
Yeah,
injuries
just give
and
him a spin.
fatalities, this was the safest
We're gonna
position on
rotate
the
this.
B-17.
What? Really?
This, yeah. the
I
reverse-
thought it was just the opposite.
Nope. The waist guns took the biggest hits primarily because there were two.
Rare opportunity.
Oh, my gosh.
We don't put everybody through this.
This is amazing. I should have given somebody my camera to take a picture.
Well, you'll see all this on Facebook.
Okay, good, great. Oh my gosh. Dad, I can understand why you didn't want to stay inside this thing.
It's quite the graceful
Yeah.
I'm trying to
position.
figure out what he got his oxygen hose hooked
And
on.
you can't have your chute in there with you either. You have to get back up in the plane to get your chute on.
So did you plug into an oxygen hose somewhere in here for oxygen?
Yes, you'd have oxygen in there.
Okay.
And there's a little heater down underneath. that
Underneath
you
his
can-
butt
You
there.
can plug your suit into.
Okay.
And get a tiny bit more heat through the arms and legs.
When they work.
Yeah.
When they
So
work.
is this the oxygen up here on the left?
Could be, I'm not
Where you
sure
hook
just
in?
where that
Okay.
is in there now. Yeah.
It almost looks like that could be where
Uh-huh.
something
Right.
like oxygen hooks in.
Yes, you'd have that, and your ammunition's fed into you from up above here into the guns on either side.
And
And the cartridges are expelled outside, so
out the bottom of the.
you don't get filled with cartridges.
I think that happened in the tail gun too, didn't it?
Yes,
Because I know I talked to one of the guys, I think it was Marty Guerin, that said what you don't read much about is when you're flying in formation and you're down below, the number of times you get hit by cartridges from planes above.
Oh,
you.
yes, yeah.
And crack the nose, crack windshields and everything. Oh, this is amazing.
Okay, I need a big smile. This
I
way.
want a big smile.
Look at me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, time to peel out of here.
We could lift this up and
Make
help
sure
him out.
everybody get out of there.
Pour him out of there.
Wait. Hold on for a second. I gotta make sure I got that smile.
Okay,
We're
half out.
Yep, I got the smile.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just get my feet
Get a
clear.
foot down,
Yep.
there you
We're
go.
off.
Okay, very good.
Oh, that was amazing, thank you.
I was on a B.
Remember we had the front facing-
We had to change positions now and then. I was a bombardier, but
Yeah, but
still maybe
it becomes a tripping hazard.
Okay.
The gun's out there.
Because I was.
The only time my dad manned the gun was on one of his last
then
two
you
or
can't
three
walk around.
missions. They only had one waist gunner on the plane
Well,
and
we
they were
haven't
under
been
attack
walking
and the waist gunner
around.
got hit.
We've
I was ordered to take the waist gun and he
People
said,
were
Mike,
running their shins into the air.
I knew how to fire it,
Well,
but I'm
that's
pretty
why
sure
I
I never
would
did a
take
damn thing. He said, but some
the
German
back
fighters came
and
in
stick
and
it
I
on the
just
end of
squeezed
the
off burst and
barrel.
they broke off. I said, well, then you did your job.
That was amazing, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
You gotta take a picture of me, just
Oh
stand
yeah,
there,
we need a
too.
picture of you, Annette, right there.
Okay, wait a second.
I'm holding in my gut, hurry
Oh,
up.
wait, wait.
That's the most important part.
We don't move because you talked and then it was weird looking. Okay, would my docents get around him, please?
Very good idea.
Paul? Come here, please.
It's me.
And Dawn,
stand,
you two,
why don't you
take
stand
hold on.
between the
Pardon me?
guns? We'll
We'll stand on either side of the
Dawn, I want you in the picture.
Paul,
Oh.
Please stand with him. All of you? Is that all you docents? Yeah. Nice one, you guys.